Whispers in the desert. The Arabian desert is a place where the wind itself seems to guard secrets. Endless dunes roll outward like an ocean of sand, concealing the bones of forgotten civilizations. Among them lies the legend of Ubar, sometimes called the Atlantis of the Sands. For centuries, Arab storytellers spoke of a city that shone with marble pillars and wealth drawn from the incense trade. It was said to be so proud, so decadent, that the hand of heaven struck it down, swallowing it into the earth. Explorers dismissed it as myth, a desert parable of greed and punishment. But in the late 20th century, satellite images revealed strange patterns beneath the Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter. Tracks converged upon a buried ruin, confirming that something had once stood there. The mainstream fact is clear. Archaeologists uncovered the remains of a settlement that thrived around 2800 BCE, controlling the frankincense routes that made southern Arabia wealthy. Known in inscriptions as Iram, it was a center of trade where caravans moved goods from Oman toward Mesopotamia. Its position at the edge of the desert gave it immense influence, but the soil turned against them. Climate shifted, water dried, and the once vibrant hub fell silent. What was left soon drowned in sandstorms that could move entire dunes overnight. The quirky tidbit comes from the explorers of the 1930s, who claimed that Bedouin guides would whisper prayers before passing certain dunes, warning travellers that the city of pillars slept beneath them. Some even told of ghostly lights rising from the sand, a mirage said to be the last echoes of its vanished towers. Local poetry described it as a city punished for arrogance, its rulers brought low by divine decree, the line between legend and memory blurred. Yet scholars still debate whether the ruins uncovered truly represent Ubar itself, or merely a fort and caravan station that once served a much greater, still lost capital. Some argue that what collapsed was not a city, but a limestone sinkhole into which an outpost tumbled, giving rise to the myth. Others point to the oral traditions of tribes across Arabia, insisting they are too consistent to be dismissed. Could there be larger remains, deeper still, hidden by layers of sand we have yet to touch? Standing before the excavation pits, one can imagine how easily civilizations vanish. No fire, no conquest, just the quiet, relentless advance of the desert. A place bustling with merchants, perfumed with frankincense, alive with music and ritual, reduced in a few centuries to dunes where only the wind speaks. When the Quran refers to the people of Iram as those of lofty pillars, it preserves not only a religious warning, but perhaps a distant historical truth. And in this opening secret, we find a pattern that will repeat across the world. Humanity's treasures buried, not always by enemies, but often by the earth itself. What we inherit are fragments, contested evidence, and myths that refuse to die. The sands of Arabia remind us that even the proudest city may be just a whisper away from oblivion. The hidden labyrinth. Beneath the sands of Egypt, there is talk of a labyrinth so vast it could rival the pyramids in scale, yet few today even know its name. The Greek historian Herodotus described it in the 5th century BCE, a sprawling complex south of Cairo, near the ancient city of Crocodilopolis, with 12 great courts, 3,000 rooms, and corridors so confusing that even seasoned guides would lose their way. He swore that he had seen it with his own eyes, declaring it more wondrous than the pyramids themselves. And yet, the labyrinth seems to have been deliberately forgotten. Later, travellers insisted it never existed. Even modern textbooks reduce it to a footnote, if they mention it at all. The mainstream fact anchors us. At Hawara, an ancient pyramid complex built by Pharaoh Amenemhat III around 1800 BCE, archaeologists have uncovered foundations hinting at a massive adjoining structure. Scholars agree that this was the very labyrinth Herodotus described, a mortuary temple designed to overwhelm. Its walls, once painted and lined with stone, guided priests and pilgrims through a symbolic journey. But most of its stones were quarried away in later centuries, repurposed for other buildings. What remains above ground is little more than rubble. The quirky tidbit emerges from 19th century accounts, when European explorers claimed to hear villagers whisper of sealed passageways beneath their feet. A few even reported stumbling across half-buried blocks, engraved with geometric carvings, as if parts of the labyrinth still slept below layers of mud. Some writers insisted the halls were never truly destroyed, only hidden by floods of the Nile, awaiting rediscovery. In local lore, the ruins were a place where voices echoed strangely, said to be the spirits of guardians watching over the lost halls. And scholars still debate whether Herodotus exaggerated what saw, perhaps mistaking a half-ruined temple for a grander maze, or whether the labyrinth was indeed as enormous as he claimed. Ancient accounts differ. Strabo and Pliny also mention it, describing hundreds of rooms with carved ceilings and subterranean tombs. Could they all have been mistaken, or did Egypt once hold a structure whose scale would humble even modern architects? Ground-penetrating radar surveys in recent decades have hinted at anomalies beneath Hawara's sands, straight lines and rectangular patterns suggesting man-made chambers. Yet, excavations are stalled, buried under politics and logistics. Imagine the scene if it were unearthed, endless corridors stretching into darkness, murals telling forgotten stories of pharaohs, and perhaps sealed chambers untouched since the Middle Kingdom. What knowledge might rest there, pressed into stone? What rites took place in a hall so intricate it was itself a riddle? For now, the labyrinth remains both a fact and a legend, like an unfinished sentence waiting beneath the soil. If the pyramids are Egypt's proud exclamation marks, then the labyrinth is its ellipsis, hinting at more but never fully revealed. Herodotus may have seen only a glimpse of what once was, but his words still stir the imagination, and so, in the heart of Egypt, a secret sleeps under layers of mud and memory, too vast to ignore, too elusive to confirm. The Skeleton Lake, high in the Himalayas, where the air thins and snow drifts over jagged rock, there lies a lake that whispers death. Rupkund, as it is called, is a small glacial pool perched at nearly 16,000 feet above sea level. For most of the year it is frozen solid, an unremarkable dot in a vast mountain wilderness. But in warmer months the ice melts just enough to reveal what it conceals: hundreds of skeletons, strewn along its edges and even beneath the surface. Skulls, rib cages, femurs, an entire crowd, as if a procession of souls was caught mid-step and turned to bone. Locals long called it the Lake of Bones, a cursed place where no one lingers. The mainstream fact, confirmed by scientific studies, is that the bones date from around 800 CE, though later analyses suggest more than one group, spanning centuries. Some show signs of blunt force trauma to the head and shoulders, consistent not with weapons but with something falling from above. The leading theory is grimly poetic. A sudden hailstorm, with ice stones as heavy as cricket balls, caught travellers on the mountain and left them no escape. Stranded in the open, they were struck down, their bodies preserved by the cold. The quirky tidbit reaches back into local folklore, which tells of King Jastaval of Kanauj and his entourage, who journeyed into the mountains with dancers and musicians to honour the goddess Nanda Devi. The goddess, angered by their frivolity, rained death upon them with iron balls from the sky. For centuries, villagers believed the bones belonged to that ill-fated royal caravan, and they still sing songs about the divine retribution. To this day, some pilgrims who trek toward the Nanda Devi shrine stop at the lake to leave offerings, whispering apologies to the fallen. And yet, scholars still debate whether the lake's mystery is solved. Genetic analysis revealed that some skeletons belonged to people of South Asian ancestry, while others were of Mediterranean origin, suggesting that Rupkun drew pilgrims or wanderers from far afield. How did foreigners from distant lands die beside locals in the same frozen bowl? Was it trade, pilgrimage, or perhaps a ritual? Others question the hailstorm theory entirely, arguing that multiple events may have led to multiple waves of death centuries apart. Picture the lake on a quiet afternoon. The ice glistens under a pale sun, thin enough to show the outline of a skull beneath the surface. The wind hisses through the valley like an ancient lament. No temple, no battlefield, no plague, just an alpine amphitheatre where history has scattered its bones. It is one of the few places on Earth where the past looks back at us with empty sockets, asking questions we cannot answer. The Himalayas are littered with myths, but Rupkund is not a myth. It is tangible, a chilling reminder of nature's cruelty and humanity's fragility. For every bone we can date, there is still a story untold. Why they climbed so high, what drew them together, and how their last cries must have echoed against the peaks before silence fell. The secret star map. Far from icy lakes and mountain passes, we move into the heat of West Africa, where one people's knowledge of the heavens has long puzzled scholars. The Dogon, a tribe living in the cliffs of Mali, tell stories of Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky. Their oral tradition speaks not only of the star itself, but of an unseen companion star, small, dense, and incredibly heavy. Modern astronomy confirms this. Sirius has a white dwarf partner invisible to the naked eye, discovered only in the 19th century with telescopes, yet the Dogon had described it generations earlier, with details they should never have known. The mainstream fact lies in the astronomy itself. Sirius B, the white dwarf, orbits Sirius A every 50 years, and it is one of the densest objects in the galaxy that can still be detected. French anthropologists Marcel Griaule and Germain Dieterlin, working with the Dogon in the 1930s, recorded their belief in a tiny star orbiting Sirius, something science at that time had only just begun to confirm. The Dogon also described a spiral motion and a 50-year cycle, uncannily accurate to what astronomers later observed. The quirky tidbit comes from the Dogon's creation myths. They tell of beings called the Nommo, who descended from the sky in a vessel that spun and landed with a great noise. The Nommo taught the Dogon the secrets of the universe, agriculture, weaving, and the cycles of the stars. For the Dogon, astronomy is not a detached science, but a living inheritance from divine teachers. Their masks and ceremonies still reflect these cosmic lessons, blending art, faith, and science into one. And scholars still debate whether the Dogon's knowledge of Sirius B was truly ancient, or whether it was influenced by contact with Europeans. Some argue that 19th century missionaries or traders may have shared astronomical ideas, which went then absorbed into Dogon traditions. Others insist that the precision is too striking to dismiss as contamination. Could oral traditions have preserved fragments of ancient knowledge from Egypt or beyond? Or are we imposing patterns where coincidence suffices? Standing in the Dogon cliffs at night, one sees a sky untouched by city lights. The Milky Way arches overhead, so bright it casts shadows. In such a landscape, stars are not just distant suns, but companions, guides, and keepers of rhythm. It is easy to imagine knowledge passed down carefully, ritualized in stories, so that nothing is lost. But it is also easy to feel the pull of mystery. How could a people without telescopes know what even the Greeks did not? Whatever the answer, the Dogon story reminds us that science and myth often grow from the same root. Observation of the skies can become myth, and myth can carry seeds of truth. Just as the sands of Arabia preserved whispers of a lost city, so too the cliffs of Mali preserve whispers of the cosmos. a star map drawn not on paper but in song and ritual, and in those whispers lies another ancient secret, half buried, half shining above us. The forgotten fortress. Beneath the rolling plains of Cappadocia in central Turkey lies a world few suspected until chance revealed it. In 1963, a villager renovating his home knocked down a wall and uncovered a tunnel. Following it led him deeper, past chamber after chamber, into a vast underground complex. This was Derinkuyu, a subterranean city large enough to shelter tens of thousands of people, hidden for centuries beneath the ground. For a world accustomed to pyramids rising skyward, Derinkuyu was shocking in the opposite direction, a metropolis turned inward, buried deliberately, as if the earth itself was its shield. The mainstream fact is striking. Archaeologists date Derinkuyu's origins to the early 1st millennium BCE, though later expanded by Byzantine Christians who sought refuge from Arab invasions. The city plunges more than 280 feet deep, with at least 18 levels, ventilation shafts, wine presses, chapels, and stables. Rolling stone doors, weighing hundreds of pounds, could be slid into place to block passageways. It was a fortress underground, designed to withstand sieges for months. By conservative estimates, up to 20,000 people could live within it. The quirky tidbit lives in local folklore. For generations, Cappadocians told of fairy chimneys, the strange rock spires above ground, and of tunnels that led to realms of spirits. Children were warned not to wander too far, lest they stumble into the cities of the jinn. Shepherds sometimes reported hearing echoes or distant voices beneath their feet. The legends turned out to be less fantasy than memory. Those fairy chimneys concealed entrances to real, sprawling settlements hidden below. And scholars still debate who first carved Derinkuyu. Some credit the Hittites, who flourished in Anatolia during the 2nd millennium BCE, perhaps digging initial chambers later expanded by others. Others argue it was a product of Phrygian ingenuity, carved when iron tools made such excavation possible. Still others suggest local populations slowly deepened the tunnels over centuries, each generation extending its refuge. Without inscriptions or datable artifacts from the earliest layers, the origin story remains elusive. Imagine stepping into those silent halls today. The air is cool, almost damp, carrying the faint smell of stone. Narrow stairways twist downward, lanterns revealing niches where food was stored or alcoves for prayers. One chamber might have held animals, another a school. Further down, the sound of the outside world fades, replaced by the hush of a hidden community. In times of danger, this city would have come alive with flickering firelight, children whispering, guards posted at choke points, life compressed into stone walls, while enemies passed overhead, unaware. Derinkuyu was not alone. Across Cappadocia, dozens of smaller underground cities lace the volcanic rock connected by tunnels. Together they form a network unparalleled in the ancient world. But Derinkuyu remains the largest, the most astonishing, and the most secretive, proof that sometimes survival means burying not just treasure but entire lives beneath the earth. As we move forward in our journey, we begin to notice a pattern. Some secrets, like Ubar or Rupkund, are hidden by nature, sand, ice, or storm. Others, like Derinkuyu, are hidden by deliberate human design. And in that choice to bury a city alive lies both desperation and brilliance. The sealed oracle bones. Far to the east, in the plains of northern China, another secret once lay buried. Not a city, but words themselves. For centuries, villagers near Anyang would plough their fields and uncover strange fragments of bone and turtle shell etched with markings they could not read. Many were ground into powders, believed to be dragon bones with healing properties. Only in the late 19th century did scholars realize what they were handling, the earliest known form of Chinese writing, oracle bones that had been sealed away in royal tombs for over 3,000 years. The mainstream fact is that these oracle bones date back to the late Shang dynasty around 1200 BCE. Kings and diviners would inscribe questions onto animal scapulae or tortoise plastrons. Will the harvest be good? Should the army march? Will the queen bear a son? The bones were then heated until cracks formed, which were read as answers from the ancestors and spirits. These inscriptions, thousands of them, are now recognized as the foundation of Chinese script, the ancestors of the characters still used today. The quirky tidbit is the way they were rediscovered. In 1899, a Chinese scholar suffering from malaria purchased a packet of dragon bone powder from an apothecary. To his shock, he recognized the markings on the fragments as ancient writing. Soon, collectors scrambled to find more, and entire hordes emerged from villagers' barns, where bones had been casually stored or even discarded. What had been medicine for centuries turned out to be priceless texts hiding in plain sight. And scholars still debate what else these bones might conceal. Were they merely ritual records, or do they hint at histories and events now lost? Some inscriptions mention names and battles that align with archaeological finds. Others tell of eclipses and natural disasters. Could more bones, still buried in unexcavated tombs, hold entire lost narratives of China's first kings? Some even speculate that older proto-writing systems may have existed before the Shang, hidden deeper in the soil, awaiting discovery. Picture the royal court of the Shang at night. Torches flicker, priests chant, and the king waits for the verdict of the spirits. A tortoise shell is heated, the sharp sound of cracking like thunder in miniature. The diviner peers at the lines, then carves the result into the surface, ensuring the answer will last for millennia. In that moment, a question asked in the dark becomes a permanent record, an echo of human anxiety and hope sealed in bone. The oracle bones are a reminder that writing itself began not for poetry or storytelling, but for communication with the unseen. They were hidden away in pits and tombs, meant to be offerings, not archives. Yet by being buried, they survived. And when they surfaced again, dusty and broken, they carried the voices of an ancient world that believed even the cracks in bone could speak the truth. The desert glass. Across the endless Sahara, far from fertile valleys and caravan routes, lies a strange field of greenish-yellow glass scattered over the sand. At first glance it looks like chunks of dull crystal, but when polished it gleams like emerald. This is Libyan desert glass, one of the most mysterious materials of the ancient world. The fragments are enormous, some weighing more than 25 kilograms, and they are among the purest natural silica ever found. For centuries, nomads avoided the area, calling it cursed land, where the sun itself seemed to have scorched the earth into stone. The mainstream fact is that scientists date this glass to roughly 29 million years ago. The most accepted explanation is that it was created by an enormous meteor strike or atmospheric explosion which generated heat hotter than a nuclear blast, fusing the sand into glass. Its presence is proof that cosmic events have left scars on our planet long before humans walked it. And yet, even here, human hands found purpose. The pharaoh Tutankhamun was buried with a dagger and a scarab amulet carved from Libyan desert glass, its shimmering surface linking heaven and earth. The quirky tidbit is that early explorers in the 19th century were so baffled by the glass that some speculated it was the residue of a lost civilization's furnaces, an accidental byproduct of forgotten industries. Others whispered of divine fire, a punishment from the gods. One eccentric theory claimed it was the remains of lightning bolts hurled during the battles of myth. Even today, some fringe voices argue that the glass could be evidence of prehistoric technology or even ancient warfare, a notion both tantalizing and unproven. And scholars still debate exactly how it formed. No impact crater has ever been conclusively identified in the Libyan desert. leading some geologists to suggest that the glass might have been created by a massive airburst like the Tunguska event in Siberia in 1908. Others argue that the evidence points to an impact that was later buried or eroded away. The debate lingers. Was this glass born of a strike from space or a colossal explosion above the sand? Imagine ancient travellers stumbling upon the field of glass. They would have seen the desert glittering under the sun, shards of translucent stone catching the light like a sea of jewels. To them it must have seemed supernatural, a gift or warning left by the gods. For the artisans of Egypt, carving a scarab out of this strange material, it was not just a trinket but a talisman, an object touched by the cosmos. In the Sahara's silence, these fragments remain scattered, too heavy to drift with the sand, too alien to blend into the earth. They are, in a way, time capsules of catastrophe, frozen fire born of unimaginable heat. Buried beneath myth, polished by ritual, they whisper of a time when the sky itself reached down and burned the desert into glass. The tomb that vanished. Few figures in history have captured the imagination like Alexander the Great. His empire stretched from Greece to India, and yet his final resting place, the tomb of the man who dreamed of ruling the world, remains a secret. Ancient sources describe a magnificent mausoleum in Alexandria, Egypt, where his body lay in a golden sarcophagus. Roman emperors travelled there to pay homage. Julius Caesar, Augustus, and Caligula were said to have gazed upon his mummified remains. And then, at some point in late antiquity, the tomb vanished, as though swallowed by the city itself. The mainstream fact is that contemporary accounts confirm the tomb once existed. After Alexander's death in 323 BCE, his body was hijacked en route to Macedonia and brought instead to Egypt, where Ptolemaic rulers enshrined him as both king and god. By the 2nd century CE, records mention a grand shrine called the Soma in Alexandria, but sometime after the 3rd century, descriptions end abruptly. Earthquakes, floods, and political turmoil all may have erased its trace. Today, archaeologists have searched beneath Alexandria's streets for decades, without success. The quirky tidbit lives in the centuries of rumour that followed. In the Middle Ages, pilgrims and travellers whispered that Alexander's body lay hidden beneath the city, guarded by curses. Some claimed it had been moved to Constantinople or even to Venice, disguised as the relics of St. Mark. One legend tells of a glass coffin containing the conqueror, displayed until the citizens feared his gaze and buried him again in secrecy. The multiplicity of tales suggests not certainty, but unease. A tomb too important to admit had been lost. And scholars still debate where Alexander's remains truly rest. Some suggest the tomb lies beneath modern Alexandria, drowned by the sea as parts of the ancient city sank. Others argue that it may still be sealed under later construction, hidden by centuries of rebuilding. Fringe theories place it as far away as Siwa Oasis, the site of Alexander's famous consultation with the Oracle of Ammon. But the absence of conclusive evidence keeps the mystery alive, one of history's greatest rulers, missing in death as he never was in life. Picture Alexandria today, traffic roaring, modern buildings rising, the Mediterranean lapping at the shore. Somewhere beneath this bustling city, under layers of concrete and time, may lie the silent chamber of Alexander. Gold dust may cling to stone walls, perhaps inscriptions wait to be read, recounting victories in his own name. Or perhaps the tomb is gone forever, dismantled in antiquity, its treasures scattered, its body lost to history. What makes the story haunting is not only the loss itself, but the deliberate silence that followed. The greatest tomb of the Hellenistic world, recorded by generations, slipped into shadow almost overnight. Was it destroyed to erase his cult, hidden to protect it, or quietly forgotten as Alexandria changed hands? Until the earth yields its answer, Alexander's tomb remains one of humanity's greatest buried secrets. the copper mines of King Solomon. Deep in the Timna Valley of southern Israel, a jagged desert of copper-coloured cliffs and sandstone pillars conceals scars of ancient industry. To the untrained eye, the formations look like mere natural arches and ridges, yet beneath them lie shafts and tunnels, copper mines dug thousands of years ago. For centuries, they were called King Solomon's Mines, a phrase that evoked endless treasure, sacred wealth, and divine metallurgy. Explorers imagined chambers lined with gold, guarded by curses. The reality, though less glittering, is no less mysterious. The mainstream fact is that Timna's mines date back to at least the 13th century BCE. Archaeological excavations show smelting camps where workers extracted copper, the metal that powered Bronze Age tools and weapons. By the 10th century BCE, during the period associated with King Solomon, the valley was still active, its furnaces burning night and day. Evidence of food, fabrics, and even dung analysis reveal a well-organized society of miners and overseers, producing copper on a scale vast enough to fuel kingdoms. The quirky tidbit surfaces in local legends and early European expeditions. When 19th century explorers arrived, they heard Bedouins speak of hidden chambers and treasures left by Solomon himself. Some even claimed that miners once carved talismans into the rock to keep away jinn. Biblical imagination only added fuel. If Solomon's temple was adorned with vast bronze furnishings, the pillars, Jashin and Boaz, the great basin called the sea, surely the copper had come from here. Tourists in later centuries searched the cliffs as if hunting for gold, not copper, still entranced by the myth. And scholars still debate whether the mines of Timna were truly under Solomon's control. Some argue that the mining operations were run by the Egyptians earlier, particularly under Pharaoh Ramses III, and that later activity was managed by the Edomites, a people who lived east of the Jordan River. Others suggest that Israelite overseers may indeed have been involved, pointing to the 10th century BCE radiocarbon dates that align with Solomon's reign. The question lingers, was this truly Solomon's domain, or a foreign enterprise woven into his legend? Imagine the valley at night during its height, the desert air thick with smoke, the glow of furnaces painting the cliffs red, slaves and labourers hammering at stone, feeding charcoal into fire, molten copper dripping into moulds, overseers tallying ingots, priests perhaps murmuring prayers over the product destined for sacred use, the sound of industry echoing through the silence of the wilderness, a metallic heartbeat in the desert. Today, Timna is a park where tourists wander among towering rock formations, with names like Solomon's Pillars, still bearing the memory of biblical grandeur. But beneath the romance of treasure hunt novels and films lies the true secret, that even in the remotest valleys, ancient people mastered fire and earth to create wealth and power. Whether Solomon's hands touched this copper or not, the valley holds the buried evidence of a civilization's furnace, a secret industry that shaped history and then was left to sand and silence. The Shaman's Cave. In the green hills of northern Spain, a farmer in 1868 stumbled into a cave while searching for shelter from the rain. What he found was not shelter, but silence, and on the walls, paintings that shimmered like ghosts in torchlight. The cave of Altamira would soon be recognized as one of the greatest treasures of prehistoric art, a gallery sealed for millennia, its masterpieces hidden beneath rock. Yet for decades after its discovery, many scholars refused to believe it was real. The mainstream fact is that Altamira's paintings date back over 20,000 years, created by Paleolithic hunter-gatherers. The ceiling of the cave is covered with bison painted in ochre and black, their muscles bulging, their stance alive with movement. Horses, deer, and mysterious symbols accompany them, making the chamber feel like a shrine. These were not crude doodles, but sophisticated works, layered with shading techniques that would not reappear until Renaissance frescoes. The quirky tidbit comes from the early days of discovery. Marcelino Sanz de Sautuola, the amateur archaeologist who excavated the cave with his young daughter, presented his findings in 1880. Instead of acclaim, he faced ridicule. Academics accused him of fraud, insisting the paintings were too advanced to be prehistoric. Some suggested he had hired a modern artist to fake them. Sautuola died in disgrace, never vindicated in his lifetime. Only decades later, when other painted caves were found across Europe, was his discovery acknowledged as genuine. The cave itself had kept its secret too well, hidden until science was ready to believe. And scholars still debate the purpose of the paintings. Were they shamanic visions, perhaps drawn by individuals under trance, meant to capture the spirits of animals? Were they part of hunting magic, an attempt to control prey by painting its likeness, or were they imply the earliest form of storytelling, a record of life and myth on the Ice Age plains? Some markings suggest constellations, leading others to propose that the cave was also an ancient observatory, a cosmic map in ochre. Picture standing inside the cave today. The air is cool, the stone damp with centuries of breath. A guide dims the electric lights, and for a moment only flickering lamps illuminate the ceiling. The animals come alive in shadow and glow, as they must have for their creators. In that silence, the paintings feel less like art and more like an invocation, a way to bridge the distance between human and animal, mortal and spirit. What makes Altamira's story so poignant is not only the art itself, but the way it was doubted and hidden. A treasure buried in darkness, dismissed when finally revealed, only to be celebrated after its discoverer was gone. The cave reminds us that ancient secrets do not always come with applause. Sometimes they emerge to disbelief, resistance, or even scorn, and yet, like the figures on the ceiling, they endure, waiting for the light that will finally reveal their truth, the secret of Teotihuacan. On the plateau of central Mexico rises Teotihuacan, the city of the gods, a vast grid of pyramids and avenues that once held perhaps 250,000 souls. Its builders remain nameless. By the time the Aztecs arrived, centuries later, the city was already abandoned, its founders forgotten. But even in ruin, Teotihuacan has continued to reveal secrets that astonish. The latest lies not in what towers above, but in what was hidden beneath, a subterranean tunnel leading to chambers laced with liquid mercury. The mainstream fact is that in 2003, archaeologists discovered an underground passage beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, one of Teotihuacan's central monuments. Over years of careful excavation, they revealed hundreds of offerings, jade statues, seashells from distant coasts, and strange spheres covered in pyrite. And then came the most startling find: pools of mercury shimmering in the torchlight, lying deep underground. In antiquity, mercury was rare and dangerous to handle. Its deliberate placement here suggests ritual significance, perhaps to represent rivers or lakes in the underworld. The quirky tidbit comes from the strange objects uncovered along the way. Some of the pyrite-coated balls, perfectly round and golden, were so otherworldly that headlines briefly called them alien artifacts. Others likened them to toys or to symbols of stars. Coupled with the mercury, an element later associated with alchemy, the find stirred whispers of Teotihuacan as a place where priests and rulers guarded forbidden knowledge. Even the Aztecs, who stumbled on the ruins, believed the gods themselves had built it, calling its avenue the Road of the Dead. And scholars still debate what exactly the mercury meant. Some argue it was a symbolic landscape, turning the underground chambers into a model of the cosmos. Others suggest it was, as part of initiation rites where priests might enter to commune with deities. A few raise the possibility of embalming or preservation, though no royal tomb has yet been found in Teotihuacan. The city's rulers remain invisible, their bodies missing, their names erased. Was the mercury meant to guard them, or to conceal something never meant for mortal eyes? Standing at the mouth of the tunnel today, one feels both awe and unease. The darkness stretches inward, the air heavy with centuries of silence. It is easy to imagine priests descending with torches, carrying offerings, their chants echoing off damp walls. The mercury pools reflecting light like liquid mirrors, suggesting rivers of another world. Above ground, the pyramids soared toward the sky. Below, a hidden world mirrored it in shadow. Teotihuacan remains an enigma, a metropolis with no known rulers, no deciphered language, and now an underworld that glitters with poison metal. It is a reminder that secrets are not always sealed by nature or accident. Sometimes they are built deliberately, meant to endure, to outlast their creators, and to challenge us centuries later with questions we are still not ready to answer. The crystal skulls. Among the most enduring mysteries of Mesoamerica are the crystal skulls, life-sized human crania carved from clear or milky quartz. Dozens of them have surfaced over the last 2 centuries, often without proper excavation records, arriving in museums and private collections, with stories as strange as the objects themselves. Some claim they were relics of the ancient Maya or Aztecs, tools of shamans, or even gifts from gods. Others whisper that they hold mystical powers, to heal, to curse, to reveal visions when gazed upon in moonlight. The mainstream fact is that at least a few crystal skulls are genuine products of pre-Columbian craftsmanship. Quartz was known and carved in the ancient Americas, often into beads, figurines, or ritual objects. But many of the most famous skulls, such as the one in the British Museum or the so-called Mitchell-Hedges skull, bear traces of modern rotary tools, suggesting they were crafted in the 19th century, likely for collectors hungry for exotic antiquities. In other words, while quartz carving is ancient, the skull's specific form may be a much more recent invention. The quirky tidbit is the legend that spread in the 20th century, that there are exactly 13 crystal skulls scattered across the world, each holding a fragment of ancient wisdom. When united, the story goes, they would reveal knowledge capable of saving or destroying humanity. This myth, likely born from spiritualist circles, took on a life of its own. The skulls appeared in seances, novels and films, cementing their place in the imagination far beyond archaeology. Some modern shamans still hold ceremonies with them, treating them as conduits of cosmic energy, and scholars still debate the origins of the earliest skulls. Were they carved in Mexico in the late colonial period, blending indigenous techniques with European tools? Were they produced in Europe entirely, perhaps in Germany's famous gem-cutting centres, then passed off as Aztec relics? Or could a handful truly date to pre-Columbian workshops, later joined by clever forgeries? Without secure excavation evidence, the line between authentic artifact and inspired hoax blurs. Imagine, however, encountering one in a dim temple chamber, quartz catching the light of a torch. Its hollow eyes seem to glow, its surface cold to the touch. Whether carved in antiquity or more recently, its presence commands awe. The human skull is among our most potent symbols, a reminder of mortality, yet in crystal form it becomes luminous, eternal, both terrifying and alluring. Perhaps that is why the crystal skulls endure as a secret half buried in truth and half in legend. They are not just objects, but mirrors for our fascination with death, with hidden wisdom, with the possibility that the ancients knew something we do not. And so, whether museum pieces, ritual tools, or clever inventions, they remain lodged in the collective imagination, an enduring enigma carved in stone, waiting for answers we may never fully uncover. The Sunken Shrine. Off the coast of Japan's Ryukyu Islands, beneath the waves near Yonaguni, lies a structure that has stirred controversy since divers first stumbled upon it in 1986. At a depth of about 25 meters, massive stone terraces and steps seem to rise from the seabed, forming what looks like a pyramid or temple complex. The blocks appear so precise, the angles so straight, that many insist they cannot be natural. Some call it Japan's Atlantis, a sunken shrine from a forgotten civilization. The mainstream fact is that the site exists. What divers call the Yonaguni monument is real, stretching nearly 150 meters in length. The rock formations are sandstone and mudstone, geologically prone to splitting into right angles under natural pressure. Most geologists argue the monument is simply a rare but natural phenomenon, its resemblance to architecture a coincidence shaped by erosion. Yet the site has yielded artifacts nearby, pottery fragments, stone tools, and traces of human presence, though not directly linked to the monument itself. The quirky tidbit is how local fishermen once whispered of a castle beneath the sea, long before divers ever descended. Some legends even spoke of a land bridge connecting Yonaguni to Taiwan in ancient times, a memory perhaps echoing Ice Age geography when sea levels were lower. After its discovery, enthusiasts claimed the monument contained carvings of animals, even a sphinx-like face staring into the abyss. One diver swore he saw a stairway for giants leading upward through the stone, and scholars still debate whether the monument is natural, man-made, or something in between. Could prehistoric peoples have carved and enhanced a natural formation, transforming it into a ceremonial site before rising seas swallowed it around 10,000 years ago? If so, it would rewrite the story of complex architecture, pushing it back thousands of years earlier than thought. Or is it, as skeptics argue, simply a trick of geology, our eyes imposing patterns on nature's rough edges? Picture descending into the water. Schools of fish drift past, light rippling over stone steps that seem to lead nowhere. A diver swims into what looks like a corridor, its walls smooth, its ceiling flat, as if chiselled by careful hands. The silence of the ocean amplifies the sense of wonder. Above ground, erosion scatters, softens, disguises, but here, preserved beneath the sea, the monument seems frozen in place, an accidental temple guarded by the tides. Yonaguni remains unresolved, a riddle carved into the seabed. If it is natural, it stands as a spectacular example of geology's artistry. If it is artificial, it is evidence of a civilization far older than our records allow. And if it is both, nature's canvas shaped by human hands, it becomes something more mysterious still, a partnership between stone, sea, and people whose names are long forgotten, the ancient batteries. In the storerooms of the Iraq Museum in Baghdad once sat a collection of small clay jars, plain and unassuming at first glance. Yet when scholars examined them in the 1930s, they found inside copper cylinders sealed with asphalt, each pierced by an iron rod. The objects dated to around 200 BCE, from the Parthian or Sasanian period. To modern eyes, they resembled something uncanny, primitive galvanic cells, what we would call batteries. But what would an ancient civilization do with electricity? The mainstream fact is that these so-called Baghdad batteries are real artifacts. Each vessel measures about 15 centimeters tall, and when filled with an acidic liquid, like vinegar or lemon juice, they can produce a small electrical current. Experiments have shown that the devices could generate less than 1 volt, enough to tingle the skin or coat small objects in a thin layer of metal. This discovery suggested the ancients may have stumbled upon electroplating long before Benjamin Franklin ever flew his kite. The quirky tidbit is how they were rediscovered. Local villagers unearthed some of the jars near Kujut Rabu outside Baghdad, and they were initially thought to be simple storage vessels. Only when Wilhelm Koenig, a museum curator, examined them closely did he propose their electrical function. His theory sparked waves of speculation. Some fringe enthusiasts claimed they were proof of lost high technology, perhaps even evidence of extraterrestrial contact. Others imagined priests using them to shock initiates during rituals, creating awe with invisible power. And scholars still debate what the jars were truly for. Some argue they were merely storage vessels for sacred scrolls, the copper acting as a liner. Others insist they were indeed used in rudimentary electroplating, perhaps to gild small religious objects. But no direct evidence of such PR. Actis survives from the period, leaving the question tantalizingly open. Were they toys, tools, or accidents of design, later misinterpreted? Picture a temple workshop 2,000 years ago. A priest dips a small figurine into a solution, attaches it to the copper rod, and watches as a sheen of silver spreads across the surface. The worshippers nearby gasp, convinced they are witnessing divine transformation. Or imagine a traveller being touched by an iron rod that delivers a tiny shock, enough to startle, enough to inspire reverence. Whether fact or fantasy, the thought alone is captivating. Today, replicas of the Baghdad batteries sit in science museums, often demonstrated with a fizz of lemon juice. Yet their originals remain cloaked in uncertainty, especially after some were looted during the turmoil of 2003. Like so many secrets, they were vulnerable not only to time, but to conflict. What endures is the puzzle. Did an ancient people truly harness electricity, however briefly, or have we simply projected our own science onto their simple jars? The tomb of the silver pharaoh. In 1940, while the world's attention was fixed on war, a French archaeologist named Pierre Montet worked quietly in Egypt's Nile Delta. At Tanis, he uncovered a burial chamber undisturbed for nearly 3,000 years. Inside lay treasures of dazzling beauty, masks, amulets, and sarcophagi gleaming with precious metal. But unlike Tutankhamun's tomb, discovered 2 decades earlier, this one contained something stranger still, an entire coffin made of solid silver. The tomb belonged to Psusenes I, a little-known pharaoh of Egypt's 21st dynasty, now remembered as the Silver Pharaoh. The mainstream fact is that Psusenes reigned around 1047 to 1001 BCE, during a period when Egypt's power was fractured between northern Tanis and southern Thebes. His burial chamber, discovered intact, contained objects equal in craftsmanship to Tutankhamun's, though made largely of silver rather than gold. At the time, silver was rarer in Egypt than gold, imported from afar, making Psusenes' coffin an extraordinary display of wealth and status. And yet, outside specialist circles, his discovery barely made headlines, overshadowed by global conflict. The quirky tidbit lies in how the tomb seemed almost cursed with obscurity. The damp soil of the delta had corroded many of the treasures, tarnishing silver and collapsing wood. Where Tutankhamun's tomb dazzled with golden gleam, Psusenes looked muted, darkened by time. Montet himself remarked that if the find had come a generation earlier, before Tutankhamun's fame, it might have been hailed as Egypt's greatest. Instead, Psusenes was buried twice, once in antiquity and again in the shadow of history. And scholars still debate why Psusenes chose silver. Was it a deliberate rejection of the golden imagery favoured by earlier pharaohs? Some suggest it reflected lunar symbolism, silver associated with the Un and rebirth. Others believe it simply reflected the trade realities of his time. Gold supplies dwindled, but silver, imported through Phoenician channels, became the metal of prestige. Whatever the reason, Psusenes' coffin remains unique. No other Egyptian king was buried in such a way. Imagine standing in that chamber, torchlight flickering across blackened silver, hieroglyphs still crisp on corroded walls. Amid the damp air, the sarcophagus gleams faintly, like moonlight trapped underground. Unlike Tutankhamun's golden mask, now iconic, Psusenes' silver face seems ghostly, reflective, more subtle. It is a beauty that whispers rather than shouts, a reminder that not all treasures shine the same way. Today, Susena's artifacts sit in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, but his story remains largely untold. He reigned long, commanded wealth, and left behind a burial unlike any other. Yet his name is far less known than the boy king whose golden tomb captured imaginations. The Silver Pharaoh's secret, it seems, was not hidden by sand or stone, but by circumstance. Discovered at the wrong time, in the wrong place, his splendour buried under history's shifting gaze. The hollow mountain. In the icy winds of Tibet rises Mount Kailash, a peak unlike any other. At 6,638 metres, it is not the tallest in the Himalayas, but it commands reverence from Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, and followers of the ancient Bon religion. To them, Kailash is the axis mundi, the centre of the world, where heaven touches earth. Pilgrims circle its base on arduous treks, but no one dares climb its summit. To ascend is forbidden, an act believed to bring disaster. Yet beneath its sacred aura lies another secret, whispered in the margins of legend. Some say Mount Kailash is not a mountain at all, but a colossal man-made pyramid, hollow within, concealing chambers of unimaginable antiquity. The mainstream fact is that Kailash has been venerated for millennia. Hindu mythology identifies it as the abode of Lord Shiva, where he meditates in eternal stillness. Tibetan Buddhists call it Mount Meru, the cosmic mountain at the heart of existence. Pilgrims walk the 52-kilometre Kora, or circumambulation, around its base, believing one circuit washes away the sins of a lifetime. Archaeologically, there is no evidence of construction. It is, by all scientific accounts, a natural peak of sedimentary rock. Yet its symmetry and striking form inspire questions. The quirky tidbit emerges from explorers and mystics. In the early 20th century, Russian travellers wrote of Kailash as a man-made pyramid, part of a network of ancient structures stretching across the globe. Later, esoteric writers claimed the mountain concealed hidden libraries, subterranean tunnels, or even an entrance to Shambhala, the mythical kingdom of wisdom. One tale tells of climbers in the 19th century who attempted to scale Kailash, only to age decades in a single day, their hair turning white before they descended. And scholars still debate the roots of Kailash's legends. Are they purely mythic, born from the mountain's striking appearance and isolation? Or could they preserve echoes of ancient rituals when early peoples viewed natural peaks as sacred altars? Some suggest the pyramid-like profile of Kailash fuels the imagination, encouraging comparisons to human monuments like the pyramids of Egypt. Others see the myths as allegories, not literal, yet powerful in shaping cultural memory. Picture the mountain at dawn, its snow-capped summit glowing red in the first light. Pilgrims shuffle along the rocky paths below, prayer wheels spinning, voices chanting mantras carried by the wind. The peak rises above them, aloof, untouched, as if guarding its own silence. Whether solid stone or hollow sanctuary, it inspires awe not through conquest but through restraint, the reverence of leaving it untouched. In the modern world, where mountains are climbed, mapped and measured, Kailash remains unique, a place where human ambition halts at the foot of sacred ground. Perhaps its greatest secret is not what lies within, but what it teaches, that some mysteries endure because we choose not to break them open. The Seal of Indus. In the fertile plains of the Indus Valley, more than 4,000 years ago, a civilization flourished. Its people built cities with straight streets, running water and brick houses, a level of planning unmatched for its time. Yet when archaeologists uncovered these cities in the 1920s, they found something even stranger. Thousands of carved seals, each etched with animals, symbols, and a script unlike any other. To this day, those markings, now called the Indus script, remain undeciphered, their message sealed as tightly as the clay they were pressed into. The mainstream fact is that the Indus Valley civilization, spanning from roughly 2600 to 1900 BCE, produced more than 4,000 examples of this writing on seals, pottery and tablets. The script consists of short clusters of symbols, some resembling plants, fish or tools, others entirely abstract. Despite decades of study, no one has cracked the code. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs or Sumerian cuneiform, there is no bilingual text, no Rosetta Stone to guide us. The seals were buried with their makers, their language silenced. The quirky tidbit is how one of the first seals was unearthed. In 1872, a British officer stationed in India bought a strange little carving from a local villager. It showed a bull-like animal and odd symbols above it. He thought little of it and tucked it away. Only later, when more of the same surfaced, did scholars realize they were pieces of an enormous puzzle. Today, some of the most famous seals show unicorn-like beasts, processions of animals, and even what may be a proto-goddess figure seated in meditation, images that hint at religion and myth we cannot fully grasp. And scholars still debate what the script represents. Was it a full language with grammar and vocabulary, or a system of symbols used mainly for trade and administration? Some believe it was Dravidian, ancest, Rail to languages still spoken in southern India. Others argue it might have been something entirely lost, cut off from later traditions. The brevity of the inscriptions, often no more than 5 to 10 signs, makes the task harder. Without longer texts, the code refuses to yield. Picture one of these seals in hand, a square of steatite no larger than a coin, its surface carefully carved, its edges smoothed. Pressed into clay, it would leave behind the mark of ownership or ritual linking person and object. To its maker, the symbols carried certainty, identity, perhaps even blessing. To us, it is an enigma, a voice from a vanished world speaking in syllables we cannot hear. The Indus seals are not treasure in the glittering sense. They are small, quiet artifacts, yet they hold the key to one of humanity's earliest urban civilizations. Until their script is understood, the Indus Valley remains half hidden, a culture whose streets we can walk, whose drains we can trace, but whose thoughts remain locked. The seals are their silence, preserved in stone, waiting for someone someday to break it. The alchemical codex. In dim monasteries of medieval Europe, guarded behind thick walls and candle-lit desks, there circulated a strange and elaborate manuscript known as the Ripley Scrolls. Painted with dragons, furnaces, and crowned alchemists, the scrolls unfurled, meters long, each one a map of symbols leading toward a singular goal, the philosopher's stone, the mythical substance said to transmute base metals into gold and grant eternal life. The scrolls were copied, hidden, and recopied across centuries, deliberately veiled in riddles. To the uninitiated, they looked like nonsense. To those within the circle of alchemists, they were a coded path toward hidden transformation. The mainstream fact is that the Ripley Scrolls date to the 15th and 16th centuries, inspired by the writings of the English alchemist George Ripley. Though Ripley himself may never have created such scrolls, his name gave them authority. They contain long verses of cryptic English, mixed with images of toads, flasks, and phoenixes. More than 20 survive today, scattered in libraries from London to Yale. Historians see them as instructional guides, not for chemistry in the modern sense, but for a blend of natural philosophy, mysticism, and art. The quirky tidbit is how alchemists guarded these works. Some scrolls were deliberately buried in the archives of monasteries, disguised as harmless religious texts. Others were passed hand to hand in secret societies, their images designed to confuse outsiders. Even the colours, brilliant reds, golds, and greens, were thought to contain symbolic meaning. One legend tells that a scroll was hidden inside a hollow wall, found only centuries later during renovations. To those who possessed them, the scrolls were more than parchment. They were keys to divine knowledge, too dangerous for the common eye, and scholars still debate what the scrolls truly meant. Were they genuine attempts to describe chemical processes hidden behind allegory, or were they spiritual metaphors describing the transformation of the soul under the guise of laboratory imagery? Some symbols line up eerily well with modern concepts of distillation, sublimation, and crystallization. Yet the final prize, the philosopher's stone, remains elusive, perhaps never meant to be literal. Imagine unrolling one of these vast scrolls in a quiet chamber. Dragons curl across the parchment, alchemists bend over furnaces, streams of Latin and English rhyme twist like incantations. To the untrained reader it is bewildering. To the devoted it is revelation. Each image is a veil, and behind each veil another mystery. Whether one sought gold or enlightenment, the journey itself was the treasure, and the scroll the map. The Ripley scrolls remind us that some secrets are hidden not by sand or stone, but by language and image. They were buried in code, accessible only to those who believed and persisted. In their bright colours and bizarre creatures lies a record of humanity's hunger, not just for wealth, but for transcendence. The ghost stepwells. In the arid landscapes of western India, where rain falls only briefly and the sun rules most of the year, ancient engineers built wonders to trap and store every precious drop of water. These were stepwells, vast subterranean structures of carved stone, where flights of stairs descended deep into the earth, leading to cool reservoirs. Some were plain and functional, others were elaborately adorned with pillars, arches, and statues, like inverted temples. For centuries they sustained kingdoms and pilgrims alike. Then, as rivers shifted and colonial neglect set in, many were buried by sand and rubble, their entrances forgotten. They became ghost stepwells, silent temples of water hidden below the dust. The mainstream fact is that stepwells, or baolis, date back as early as the 3rd century BCE and flourished especially between the 11th and 16th centuries CE. Among the most magnificent is Rani Ki Vav in Gujarat, a stepwell nearly 7 stories deep, its walls lined with more than 1,000 sculptures of gods and guardians. UNESCO recognizes it as a masterpiece of engineering and artistry, but for every Rani Ki Vav that has been restored, dozens remain buried, collapsed or sealed, their stairs descending into darkness. The quirky tidbit is how local legends often warned villagers away from abandoned wells. Some were said to be haunted by spirits of those who drowned, others by nagas, serpentine deities who guarded water. In some villages, women whispered that stepwells were gateways to the underworld. One colonial officer wrote of stumbling across a half-buried well where bats flew out in clouds, shrieking as if the place itself rejected intrusion. Even in ruin, the wells carried an aura of both reverence and fear, and scholars still debate the full social role of stepwells. Were they primarily utilitarian, serving only as water storage, or did they double as temples, places of gathering, worship, and storytelling? Inscriptions suggest they were commissioned by queens and merchants alike, reflecting devotion as well as civic pride. Some even believe they encoded astronomical alignments, with staircases designed to catch certain angles of the sun during solstices. But without excavation of the buried ones, much remains speculation. Picture descending into a stepwell at the height of summer. The air cools with every level down, the sunlight narrowing to a golden shaft above. At the base, water glimmers like a hidden jewel, ringed by sculpted pillars. Once these wells must have been alive with voices, women filling pots, priests chanting, children playing in the shade. Now, many lie silent, their stairs clogged by sand, their reservoirs dry. The ghost stepwells of India are a reminder that not all ruins are above ground. Some of humanity's greatest works sink inward, disappearing beneath the earth when neglected. In their hidden depths lies a secret that is both practical and spiritual, the ancient union of survival and beauty, water and worship, carved into stone and then deliberately buried by time. The silent city of Petra. In the rugged cliffs of southern Jordan lies Petra, the rose-red city, half as old as time. Carved directly into sandstone walls, its facades gleam pink at dawn and crimson at dusk. For centuries it thrived as the capital of the Nabateans, controlling the trade of incense, spices and silk. And then, like so many great cities, it was abandoned and half buried by desert winds. To the outside world, Petra was a rumour, a name in ancient texts, until rediscovered by European explorers in the 19th century. But even now, its greatest secrets lie not in the visible temples, but in the hidden chambers sealed within the rock. The mainstream fact is that Petra was established around the 4th century BCE and flourished for centuries as a crossroads of commerce. Its most famous monument, Al-Khazneh, the treasury, was not a treasury at all, but likely a royal tomb. Archaeologists have mapped hundreds of tombs and structures carved into the cliffs, but many remain unopened. Inscriptions suggest entire complexes of rooms behind sealed doors, untouched since antiquity. For practical and preservation reasons, some chambers have never been excavated, their contents still mysteries. The quirky tidbit is that local Bedouin once believed Al-Khazneh's urn atop the facade held gold. For generations they shot at it with rifles, trying to crack it open, leaving bullet holes still visible today. Others whispered that Petra was built not by men but by giants or even jinn, who hollowed out the cliffs overnight. When Swiss explorer Johann Burckhardt disguised himself to enter Petra in 1812, he described it as if he had stumbled upon a dream, an entire city hidden in stone, unknown to his world. And scholars still debate how the Nabateans achieved such feats of architecture. Did they possess advanced tools to cut with such precision, or was it simply extraordinary craftsmanship honed over centuries? Some structures, like the monastery, rise more than 150 feet tall, their surfaces so smooth it is hard to imagine they were carved with only hand tools. Others wonder about Petra's hydraulic systems, which diverted scarce desert water through hidden channels and cisterns, sustaining life in a place where survival should have been impossible. Picture walking through the Sick, the narrow canyon that leads into Petra. The walls tower above, glowing with swirls of red and orange stone. Then, at a sudden bend, the treasury appears, its columns and pediment revealed like a curtain lifting on a stage. Behind that facade lies darkness, chambers where tombs or treasures may still rest. Across the valley, hundreds of doors gape open in the cliffs, like a city of ghosts staring silently outward. Petra's silence today is deceptive. Beneath the carved facades, under the sand-filled floors, there may still be sealed halls and shrines. What the Nabateans placed there, scrolls, statues, perhaps even mummies, remains buried. The rose-red city keeps its secrets well, its beauty hiding what it refuses to reveal. The temple that sank, along India's western coast, where the Arabian Sea laps against Gujarat, legends tell of a city that once shone with golden spires. Dwarka, the sacred city of Krishna, was said to be built on the shore, a marvel of walls, palaces and temples. According to Hindu epics, it was destroyed when the sea rose to reclaim it, leaving nothing but waves. For centuries, scholars dismissed Dwarka as myth, a poetic setting for divine tales. Yet in the late 20th century, divers and archaeologists found something startling. Stone structures beneath the sea, arranged in patterns too deliberate to be chance. The mainstream fact is that off the modern city of Dwarka, marine archaeologists have documented walls, streets, and foundation stones lying underwater. Dating techniques suggest some of these remains could be as old as 1500 BCE, though interpretations vary. Above ground, the current Dwarkadish temple stands as one of Hinduism's holiest sites, rebuilt many times but always tied to the memory of Krishna's city. The underwater ruins add weight to the idea that the legend may be rooted in real settlements drowned by shifting sea levels. The quirky tidbit is how fishermen in the region long claimed they pulled up carved stones in their nets, or glimpsed walls on clear days through the water. Some told of hearing temple bells beneath the waves, a ghostly echo carried by the sea. When the first modern divers descended, they too reported the eerie sensation of swimming through a drowned city, columns rising from the seabed like silent guardians, and scholars still debate what exactly has been found. Some argue the ruins are remnants of later medieval constructions, submerged by coastal erosion rather than ancient catastrophe. Others point to pottery fragments and settlement patterns that suggest continuity of habitation for millennia, raising the possibility that epic tales of Dwarka preserve a cultural memory of real floods. Could the Mahabharata's account of a city consumed by the sea reflect an actual geological event passed down through myth, or are we reading history into poetry? Picture descending beneath the waves where the sea grows green and dim. Fish dart through what looks like a doorway. A stone platform stretches into shadow. The water muffles sound, and the ruins stand in silence, touched only by currents. Above, pilgrims gather in temples, chanting verses that speak of Krishna's city. Below, stone blocks whisper the same story in their stillness. Whether myth or memory, Dwarka's fate speaks to humanity's fragile relationship with the sea. Cities rise on its edge, glitter with wealth, and sometimes vanish into its depths. The drowned temples of Dwarka remind us that stories, however divine in tone, often hide kernels of truth that waits patiently beneath the waves until we are ready to see it. The Golden Disc. In the rolling hills of central Germany near Nebra, two men with metal detectors stumbled upon a cache of Bronze Age artifacts in 1999. Among them was something that would shake the study of prehistory, a bronze disc inlaid with gold, showing the sun, the crescent moon, and a scattering of stars. Measuring just over a foot across, it is now known as the Nebra sky disk, a treasure deliberately buried in the soil 3,600 years ago. It is the world's oldest known depiction of the cosmos, a map of the heavens hidden underground until the modern era. The mainstream fact is that the disk dates to around 1600 BCE, created by the Unetice culture of Central Europe. Radiocarbon analysis of the other artifacts buried with it, including swords and bracelets, confirm its Bronze Age origin. The golden inlays depict celestial objects, including a cluster of 7 dots thought to represent the Pleiades star group. Edge markings align with the solstices, suggesting the disk was used to calibrate lunar and solar calendars. For a culture without writing, it was a stunning leap of science and symbolism. The quirky tidbit is how it was found. The men who unearthed it were looters, not archaeologists, and they sold it on the black market. For years, the disk passed through shady hands, hidden in suitcases, smuggled across borders. At one point, it was stored under a bed in Switzerland, its owners unaware of its importance. Only in 2002 did authorities seize it in a sting operation, returning it to Germany. A treasure of the sky had nearly been lost to secrecy a second time, and scholars still debate the disk's meaning. Was it a practical tool for aligning agricultural cycles, a ritual object used by shamans, or a symbol of power, proof that its owner held the knowledge of the heavens? Some argue it shows evidence of far-reaching trade, since the gold and copper likely came from distant mines. Others question whether all the inlays are original, or whether the disk was altered over centuries, layered with new meaning as it passed from hand to hand. Picture standing in a Bronze Age clearing, disc in hand. The stars blaze above, but the disc captures their order, giving human eyes a way to fix the heavens in metal. In a world where survival depended on knowing the seasons, such a tool would seem nothing less than magical. Farmers, warriors, priests, all would look to the one who held it as a mediator between earth and sky. Today, the Nebra sky disk is housed in a museum, restored to its place in history. Its golden crescents still shimmer against bronze, a reminder that our ancestors gazed upward with as much curiosity as we do. They buried their knowledge in the soil, and by chance we have uncovered it. It is not only a map of the stars, it is a map of our shared longing to understand the cosmos. The Cave of the Sibyl. On the western coast of Italy, near the Bay of Naples, lies Cumae, one of the earliest Greek colonies in the region. Beneath its hills, carved into the volcanic rock, runs a long trapezoidal passage stretching more than 130 meters into darkness. This is the Cave of the Sibyl, said to be the dwelling of Apollo's prophetess, the Cumaean Sibyl. Ancient visitors believed she sat within these shadowed halls, scribbling her prophecies on leaves that the wind would scatter, leaving mortals to interpret the fragments. The cave was hidden for centuries, under layers of soil and myth, until rediscovered in the 1930s. The mainstream fact is that the Sibyl of Cumae was a central figure in Greco-Roman religion, mentioned by authors from Virgil to Ovid. According to the Aeneid, Aeneas descended into the underworld guided by her voice from this very cave. Archaeological evidence confirms that the long corridor was built in the 4th century BCE, part of a defensive and ritual complex linked to Apollo's cult. Its trapezoidal design allowed sunlight to enter briefly at certain times, heightening its aura of mystery. The quirky tidbit comes from local lore, which claimed the cave was avoided by shepherds and villagers long after its true purpose was forgotten. Some said the air inside carried whispers that were not echoes, but voices of the dead. Others told of torches refusing to burn within, as if the cave itself resisted light. When archaeologists finally cleared the passage, they found ancient lamp niches still blackened with soot, proof of ritual processions long before modern rediscovery. And scholars still debate whether this cave was truly the Sibyl's legendary seat, or whether Roman writers projected myth onto a more mundane structure. Could it have been a military tunnel, later reimagined as sacred, or was it always meant as a liminal space, a threshold between? In worlds, its function less practical than symbolic. The absence of inscriptions leaves the answer suspended, much like the Sibyl's scattered leaves. Picture walking its length today. The passage narrows, its walls damp, the air cool and heavy. Light seeps in faintly at the entrance, but deeper in, shadow reigns. One can almost imagine a figure at the far end, shrouded, waiting, her voice rising to declare the fate of empires. For the ancients, this was not mere stone, but the mouth of the divine, where the boundary between mortal and immortal thinned. The Cave of the Sibyl reminds us that some secrets are preserved not by accident, but by belief. Buried in rock, wrapped in story, it endures as both architecture and allegory. Whether prophecy ever truly echoed here, or whether later imagination filled the void, the cave remains what it has always been, a threshold, a silence that invites us to listen for words that may never come. The Vanished Towers. In the desert valleys of Peru, long before the Incas, there rose a city whose scale stunned archaeologists when it was rediscovered. This was Caral, also known as the sacred city of Caral Soup, a vast settlement dating back nearly 5,000 years. At its heart stood immense pyramidal mounds, towers of earth and stone that predated Egypt's pyramids by centuries. Yet unlike Giza, Caral was forgotten. Swallowed by shifting sands, its towers reduced to humps of earth that farmers mistook for hills. For millennia, its grandeur lay buried, its story erased. The mainstream fact is that Caral flourished around 2600 BCE, making it the oldest known urban centre in the Americas. The site stretches across 150 acres, with monumental pyramids, plazas, and residential quarters. Radiocarbon dating of woven reed bags used to haul stones for construction confirmed its age. Excavations reveal a society that thrived on trade, fishing, and agriculture, with quipu-like knots suggesting a system of record-keeping. Remarkably, no weapons or fortifications have been found, leading scholars to describe Caral as a city built on commerce and ceremony rather than war. The quirky tidbit is that when archaeologist Ruth Shady first began her work at Caral in the 1990s, she had to battle skepticism. Many dismissed her claims that the city was older than Egypt's pyramids. Some colleagues even accused her of exaggeration. Local legends, meanwhile, spoke of sleeping giants, buried in the mounds, guardians who would awaken if disturbed. Farmers avoided working too close, fearing misfortune. When the towers were finally revealed to be pyramids, the legends gained a strange kind of validation. The giants had indeed been real, if in stone rather than flesh. And scholars still debate Caral's true role in the story of civilization. Was it truly peaceful, or do we simply lack evidence of conflict? Did its influence spread far across the Andes, seeding later cultures, or was it an isolated experiment in urban life? Some argue it rewrites the narrative of the Americas, showing that complex societies arose independently here as early as anywhere else. Others question whether Caral represents a sudden leap forward or the culmination of centuries of gradual innovation now lost to history. Picture standing on the main pyramid, the desert wind sweeping across the valley. Below, plazas stretch outward, where music once played on flutes made from pelican bones, echoing against stone. Fires would have burned in ceremonial pits, traders arriving with baskets of dried fish and cotton. By night, the towers would loom in starlight, silent but alive with ritual. And then, with time, the city emptied, sand creeping over its stones, until only dunes and whispers remained. Caral's towers remind us that history is not a straight line flowing from old world to new. In the Americas, parallel civilizations were already experimenting with architecture, trade, and spirituality long before contact. Hidden under sand for 5 millennia, the towers of Caral emerged only recently, a secret city that rewrites our map of human beginnings, the Black Obelisk. In 1846, on the wind-swept plains of northern Iraq, British archaeologist Austin Henry Layard was excavating the ruins of Nimrud, the once mighty Assyrian capital. Amid broken statues and crumbling palaces, he uncovered a tall block of black limestone covered in intricate carvings and cuneiform inscriptions. Rising over 2 meters high, it was the Black Obelisk of Shalmaneser III, erected in the 9th century BCE. Its reliefs show kings bowing, tribute being paid, and camels, elephants, and exotic goods presented to the Assyrian court. But the obelisk had been deliberately buried and forgotten, hidden by the very people it once glorified. The mainstream fact is that the Black Obelisk is one of the most important Assyrian artifacts ever found. Dating to around 825 BCE, it commemorates Shalmaneser's military campaigns and depicts scenes of conquered rulers kneeling before him. Among them is an inscription mentioning Jehu, son of Omri, a king of Israel. This is the earliest known depiction of an Israelite monarch in art, providing rare historical corroboration of biblical narratives. Today, the obelisk stands in the British Museum, its panels still sharp with detail. The quirky tidbit is that when Layard first uncovered it, local villagers mistook the obelisk for a talisman. Some feared it was cursed, warning him not to touch it. Others believed the figures carved into it might come alive at night. Layard himself wrote of carrying it out of the ruins under guard, wary of superstition and theft. Later, travellers visiting the British Museum in the 19th century would gawk at the kneeling king on its surface, whispering that they were looking at the biblical world made stone. And scholars still debate why the obelisk was buried. Was it toppled in an enemy invasion, hidden by priests to preserve it, or deliberately destroyed by later Assyrians who wanted to? Erase Shalmaneser's memory? The deliberate concealment suggests unease. Why else would such a monument, meant to proclaim glory for eternity, be consigned to the earth? Others debate its significance. Was the Jehu inscription truly accurate, or could it have referred to another local ruler, his name misread by scribes? Imagine the obelisk in its original place. Standing tall in the palace courtyard, its glossy surface catching the sun, carved figures lined in neat registers, envoys from distant lands approaching, bowing low before the Assyrian king, trumpets blaring, incense burning, scribes chiselling words into stone. It was a theatre of power, propaganda etched into permanence. And then, centuries later, the same stone was toppled, buried, forgotten, its audience reduced to the soil itself. Today, the Black Obelisk survives as one of the rare pieces of history where myth, scripture, and archaeology intersect. It is both an artifact of imperial pride and a buried memory of cultural crossroads. Its survival is almost accidental, a secret hidden beneath ruin until one curious excavator pulled it back into the light. The secret of the oracle bells. In the heart of West Africa, across the savannas and forest edges of Nigeria, archaeologists have unearthed objects that ring with mystery, literally. Among the Nok and later the Yoruba and Benin traditions, bronze and iron bells were crafted not merely as instruments, but as vessels of sacred power. Many were buried in shrines, sealed beneath altars, or hidden inside clay vessels. These were not everyday chimes. They were oracles, voices of spirits, whose sounds were believed to summon gods or ancestors. To keep their power intact, they were often concealed from view, guarded and entombed in earth until rediscovered by accident centuries later. The mainstream fact is that ritual bells have been found across Nigeria dating back over 2,000 years. Excavations at Nok sites revealed terracotta figures and iron objects, including bells shaped with remarkable skill despite the absence of written records. Later Yoruba practices used agogo bells in Ifa divination, while in Benin, bronze bells were cast using the lost wax method, decorated with faces and animals. Some bells were deliberately buried in sacred groves, never meant to be rung outside ritual. They embodied both music and mystery. The quirky tidbit is that when colonial officials and early explorers stumbled across these buried bells, many were baffled. Some thought they were toys, others claimed they were tools for cattle. Local elders, however, warned that disturbing them invited misfortune. In some villages, children were told never to play near the places where bells lay hidden, lest the spirits grow angry. Stories even circulated of bells that rang on their own at night, their sound drifting through forests without a hand to strike them. And scholars still debate their full significance. Were the bells simply ritual instruments, or did they serve as encoded messages? They are tones linked to language and divination. Some argue they were used in ceremonies of kingship, where their sound announced the ruler as divine. Others suggest the burial of bells was a way of silencing them after use, ensuring that their power would not fall into unworthy hands. Without written texts, the bells speak only through their form and their silence. Picture a priest in a sacred grove 2 millennia ago. He lifts a bell and strikes it gently. The clear tone cuts through the humid air, sharp and commanding. Around him, worshippers fall silent, believing the gods are listening. When the ceremony ends, the bell is wrapped in cloth, placed in a clay jar, and buried beneath the soil, never to be seen by ordinary eyes again. To the people, the earth itself now holds the echo of the divine. Today, many of these bells rest in museums, their voices muted behind glass. Yet their history reminds us that sound, like stone or bone, can be preserved in ritual. They are secrets of resonance, hidden beneath earth and memory, their tones once guiding entire communities, now leaving only questions. The hidden codices. In the humid jungles of Mesoamerica, scribes once painted knowledge onto bark paper books folded like accordions. These codices recorded calendars, rituals, dynasties, and astronomy, the lifeblood of Maya civilization. But when Spanish conquerors arrived in the 16th century, most were burned. Diego de Landa, a Franciscan bishop in Yucatan, famously confessed, "We burned them all," which they regretted to an amazing degree, and which caused them much affliction. Of hundreds, perhaps thousands of Maya codices, only 4 authentic examples survive today. The rest were deliberately buried in fire. The mainstream fact is that the surviving Maya codices, the Dresden, Madrid, Paris, and Grolier, date from around the 11th to 15th centuries CE. The Dresden Codex, now in Germany, contains detailed astronomical tables, including remarkably accurate predictions of solar eclipses and the cycles of Venus. Such knowledge guided agriculture and ritual, anchoring the rhythms of daily life. The loss of the majority of these texts represents one of the greatest cultural erasures in history. The quirky tidbit is how the few that survived did so almost by chance. The Dresden Codex was discovered in a library in Saxony, its origins long forgotten. The Paris Codex turned up in a neglected corner of the Bibliothèque Nationale. The Grolier Codex surfaced in Mexico in the 20th century, its authenticity doubted until recent studies vindicated it. Each one was a near miss with oblivion, preserved only because someone, somewhere, hid it away. Local legends, meanwhile, whisper that hidden caves in Yucatan still guard lost manuscripts sealed by Maya priests, waiting for their time to return. And scholars still debate what might have been in the destroyed codices. Were there detailed histories of kings and wars, scientific treatises, epic poems, or even accounts of first contact with Europeans? Some suggest that Maya writing extended far beyond ritual calendars, encompassing literature we will never read. Others hold hope that more codices remain buried in caves or tombs, protected from fire and rot, their pages waiting to speak again. Picture a Maya scribe, centuries ago, seated by lamplight. He dips his brush into vivid pigment, inscribing glyphs onto bark paper coated with lime. His strokes are careful, rhythmic, part of a lineage of writing that stretches back generations. He folds the codex and places it in a temple chest, confident it will guide his descendants. He could never imagine the flames that would consume it, nor the centuries of silence that followed. The surviving codices are fragile, stained and faded, yet they stand as emissaries of a lost library. Each page is a whisper, a glimpse into a vast archive erased by conquest. The true secret here is not only what has been lost, but how much remains hidden, perhaps still tucked away in caves, beneath pyramids, or deep in the jungle. Somewhere, a forgotten codex may still lie in darkness, its painted pages intact, waiting to complete the story. The flooded pyramid, in the rolling plains of central China, not far from the city of Xi'an, archaeologists have long known of hundreds of ancient burial mounds, some shaped like stepped pyramids, others like smooth hills. Many belong to emperors and nobles of the Han dynasty, but in recent decades, as dams and reservoirs were built, some of these pyramidal tombs were deliberately flooded, disappearing beneath man-made lakes. What was once stone and earth rising above the landscape is now concealed under water, their secrets sealed away in silence. The mainstream fact is that China's landscape is dotted with monumental tombs, some dating back more than 2,000 years. The largest, The mausoleum of Emperor Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor, is still unopened, said to contain rivers of mercury and a ceiling of stars. But smaller pyramid-shaped mounds also held treasures and histories of dynasties now gone. When modern infrastructure projects expanded in the 20th century, several of these tombs were submerged, officially to provide water storage, but also, some suggest, to prevent looting. Records of their interiors are scarce, leaving entire chapters of history drowned. The quirky tidbit is the enduring rumour of a Great White Pyramid, allegedly sighted by American pilots in the 1940s. Descriptions spoke of a massive structure over 300 metres tall, gleaming with white stone, dwarfing Egypt's pyramids. Chinese authorities denied its existence, insisting no such monument had ever been recorded. Yet photographs of large mounds near Xi'an fueled speculation, and some claimed that the most imposing of these tombs were intentionally reburied or hidden beneath trees to disguise their scale. Whether exaggeration or not, the myth persists. Somewhere in China, a pyramid greater than all others may lie concealed, and scholars still debate the extent to which these tombs remain unexplored. Read. Many are off limits, declared too sacred or too unstable to excavate. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed chambers and anomalies beneath their surfaces, yet digging is forbidden. Are we protecting them for future generations with better technology, or are secrets being deliberately withheld, left to rest beneath soil and water? Picture standing by a reservoir's edge at dawn. The water lies still, reflecting mountains and sky. Beneath its calm surface, somewhere below, may rest a stepped mound, its chambers untouched since antiquity. Clay figurines, lacquered coffins, perhaps scrolls or maps, all drowned, entombed not only in earth but in water. Unlike ruins we can visit or artifacts displayed in glass, these pyramids exist only in imagination, shadows beneath ripples. The flooded pyramids of China remind us that not all secrets are lost by accident. Some are deliberately submerged, erased from view by modern decisions as much as by ancient ones. Their stories remain locked beneath reservoirs and restrictions, waiting for the day when the waters might recede and the past will rise again. The Lost Gospel. In 1945, in the Egyptian desert near Nag Hammadi, a farmer digging for fertilizer struck something unexpected. Buried in the sand were 13 leather-bound codices sealed in a large clay jar. When scholars unwrapped them, they discovered texts written in Coptic, translations of older Greek works. These were not the familiar Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but strange, long-buried writings, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, the Apocryphon of John. They belonged to a tradition later branded heretical, Gnosticism. Hidden for 1,600 years, they revealed a Christian world more diverse and contested than many had believed. The mainstream fact is that the Nag Hammadi library dates to the 4th century CE, copied by monks or scribes in Upper Egypt. When the church began suppressing Gnostic texts as dangerous, someone deliberately sealed these books in jars and buried them, perhaps to protect them from destruction. Their contents include sayings attributed to Jesus that do not appear in the canonical Gospels. The Gospel of Thomas, for example, presents him less as a saviour through death and more as a teacher of hidden wisdom, urging followers to discover the kingdom within. The quirky tidbit is how close these writings came to being lost again. When the farmer first found the jar, he almost smashed it open on the spot, fearing it might contain a jinn. Later, his mother reportedly used some of the fragile pages as fuel for cooking fires, unaware of their significance. That the majority of the codices survived is a stroke of luck, as fragile as papyrus itself. Today, they are recognized as one of the greatest manuscript discoveries of the 20th century, and scholars still debate their meaning. Do the Gnostic Gospels represent authentic teachings of early Christianity that were deliberately suppressed? Or are they later interpretations, imagine, ative rewritings that reflect theological diversity rather than lost truth? Some argue that they provide a glimpse into a vibrant pluralistic Christianity before orthodoxy hardened. Others insist they were fringe ideas, influential only in small sects. The question of authenticity lingers, as does the possibility that even more gospels remain buried. Picture the desert at dusk, wind sweeping over sand. Beneath the soil, sealed in clay, lie fragile pages inked with words that once inspired devotion, argument, and fear. When they surface centuries later, they remind us that history is not a single line, but a tangle of voices, some loud, others silenced, some buried on purpose. The Lost Gospel of Nag Hammadi shows us how fragile memory can be, and how deliberate the act of concealment often is. The texts were hidden to survive, and in doing so, they carried their secret across the centuries, ready to re-emerge when the world was finally prepared to listen. The eternal veil. Across deserts, jungles, mountains, and seas, we have followed a trail of secrets, cities buried in sand, chambers sealed beneath pyramids, manuscripts hidden in jars, treasures drowned by rising waters. Again and again, humanity has concealed its knowledge, whether by choice, catastrophe, or conquest. And so we arrive at a final reflection, the eternal veil, the human instinct to bury not only our dead, but our truths. It is a veil that stretches across cultures and centuries, woven of fear, reverence, and sometimes deliberate silence. The mainstream fact is simple. Archaeology has shown that civilizations routinely hide what they value most. In Egypt, tombs were sealed to guard kings for eternity. In China, whole armies of clay were entombed with their emperor. In Mesoamerica, codices were buried to protect them from invaders. The soil itself is a vault, and time the lock. Again and again, when spades cut into earth, we find that the past has been deliberately folded away, entrusted to the ground. The quirky tidbit is how often rediscovery feels like trespassing. Bedouin guides whispering prayers before crossing dunes above Ubar, fishermen in Dwarka swearing they heard temple bells ringing beneath the sea, villagers in India warning children away from stepwells where spirits lurked. These stories are not simply superstition, they are ways of acknowledging that the buried past is alive, watchful, and perhaps unwilling to be disturbed. The veil is not merely physical, it is psychological, cultural, almost sacred, and scholars still debate whether we should always pierce this veil. Should the labyrinth of Hawara be excavated even if it risks collapse? Should Qin Shi Huang's tomb be opened, knowing it may destroy what it reveals? Should hidden gospels and codices be celebrated, or do they destabilize traditions built on centuries of faith? The line bet, "We in preservation and intrusion is fine, and humanity has not agreed where it lies." Picture the arc of our journey. A caravan lost in Arabian dunes, bones glistening in a Himalayan lake, a sky disk gleaming with stars, a drowned city beneath the waves, a codex rescued from fire. Each secret, once buried, now half revealed, offers a fragment of who we were and who we might still be. Yet for every mystery uncovered, countless others remain sealed under soil, stone, or sea. The eternal veil is not only a record of loss, it is a reminder of continuity. We bury our secrets because we believe they matter, and when we find them again, they remind us that time is a circle, not a line. In the end, the greatest secret of all may be this: the past is never gone. It is always there beneath us, waiting in silence for the day when the veil will lift once more. Conclusion. From Ubar's lost pillars to the buried codices of Nag Hammadi, we have walked through 30 chapters of human concealment. Some secrets were hidden by catastrophe, flood, desert, or fire. Others were buried deliberately, safeguarded against looting or suppression. A few were lost simply to time, their memory slipping into legend until rediscovery restored them to history. Together they reveal a universal truth. Humanity has always guarded its knowledge, not only out of fear, but out of reverence. And yet, every rediscovery changes us. To find a star disk beneath German soil is to glimpse how Bronze Age eyes saw the sky. To unearth a labyrinth in Egypt is to realize how much still sleeps beneath our feet. These secrets remind us that history is never finished. It is a puzzle, half buried, always waiting for another piece